Um, Let me clear off this camera. Looks a little muddy to me. How we looking? That looks better. That looks better to me. Um, Hope I have some civil engagement on here. While we're waiting, you can check out my little Wolverine claws here. I have I have I have two of them. You gotta have two per. I need two per my Air Force Ones. I don't wear Air Force Ones. I think I had a pair. I think I had a pair in the 2000s. I think. I'm not even sure anymore. Actually, nah, no. Wait, I think I did. I used to always wear like, I used to keep it pretty basic, like either Air Force Ones or Reebok Classics. The Reebok, especially in the 90s, like I could just wear the Reebok Classics with anything. Then sometimes with the K Swiss Classics, they were good. They looked like the Adidas Shellheads, which I also had. I had the Adidas Shellheads when those came back in the style in the early 2000s. Um, yeah, Reebok Classics. And then what was big in the DMV area were the New Balance sneakers. Like those were pretty big, so I used to always wear those a lot. Um, so I'm fixing up something while I'm talking here. Okay, that looks decent. But yeah, let me set this up so you guys can see my cool stuff. And I might just leave it right here, and I'm gonna put on some music too. I got some cool every sip of an ice radio, not radio, classical music from the Ghibli anime studio. So I'm gonna put that on low after this commercial. Sorry, my premium ran out. I had premium for 6 months. I had free 6 months of YouTube Premium through my YouTube partner perks. Um, but the funny thing is, I actually started to miss the commercials. Plus, I was worried whether my videos themselves were getting monetized, since I wouldn't be able to see it myself. But anyway, here are my Wolverine claws, which are I think called shuko, like for like Japanese weapons as well. So, and these are actually like stainless steel, so very cool. So I can actually hurt someone. They're not sharp, but these are actually stainless steel, so it would hurt if you actually someone with them. Pretty cool though, right? Schnick. So, all right, enough of my collectibles for today. Uh, yeah. So I don't want this to damage my wedding band. Should put on my put on my rubber wedding band when I playing with metal. Pause. Anyway, thank you. I didn't know people saw it when I was showing these. I wanted them ever since I saw them at Comic Con, and I bought everything else at Comic Con except for these. Like I bought like I got like the little my like ninja rice hat. I bought like a boken. A boken is like a wooden katana for solo practice. Um, I bought a whole like bunch of comics and graphic novels and trade paperbacks. I bought a few like collectibles, like vintage Star Wars. Usually like not like the expensive ones, but like the little beater figures, and another little stuff. I remember I bought one little Batman figure. I think my nephew took it. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I like collecting stuff like that. I've if you want, I've actually done several videos. If you look in my category that says nerdy stuff, I've done several videos where I walk people around like my room here and show all my little collectibles I have all over the place. So you can check it out if you want. I'll probably end up doing another video because like every year my stuff is updated, so I have to do a new video showing all my stuff. The latest one I did, you know, I have so much stuff that it was breaking down the bookshelf because the bookshelf is old and not put. Well, I put it together, but it's become kind of flimsy, some little IKEA thing, and I took everything off the bookshelves and put most of it in a storage bin. And then I left a few things on the top of the bookshelf. So I walked people around. I took like everything out my storage bin and was showing it one by one. And then I was showing people all the stuff on the top shelf and over on my dresser. Maybe one day I'll show everyone all my books, but that's going to be more difficult because they're all in a bunch of boxes. Like, and they're mostly like textbooks and stuff from like my undergrad years and my beginning of grad school, which I'm still in the process of finishing, but that's a topic for another day. Um, but yeah, the books will probably be sometime long time from now. But anyway, let me get to some of these comments I see. Uh, Iron Knight. I might have to, wait. I'm going to grab my glasses, guys. Put on my reading glasses. I know people will make fun of me. That's all right. He said the pigeons are communist spies of the government put chemicals in the water to turn the frogs gay. How many times people gonna use that old? That's been around for so long. Where did that originate? I'm sure it was kind of funny when I first heard it years ago, but I, I don't know the origin. I think knowing the origin would make it funnier. Um, like you say, Manuel Garcia says, "Oh yeah, I have one of those." Cool. Like I said, I saw them at Comic Con, but I haven't been back to Comic Con in a few years, so I uh, I just bought them online. Besides that, probably they well no they would still have them because it's usually like a particular vendors like particular vendors that will sell like the weapons like either at Comic Con or the anime convention, which the local one here where I live is the Otakon, short for Otaku Convention. So I used to see them there, and they used to sell a whole bunch of. There was a few vendors that used to sell all sorts of like martial arts weapons and stuff. But the thing was, once you bought them, like you had to leave um, the convention and like take them to like your car or whatever where you want to keep stuff, and then you could you could come back into the convention afterwards. Serrato says, "How are you monetized at 2,000 subs?" It's not because it's not based on your subs. It's based on you have to have a certain amount of watch hours and you have to have a certain amount of subs. Already, you can be monetized at 500 subs, and you have to have enough watch hours. And really, the way you don't understand YouTube anymore because YouTube isn't even the people making the most money isn't based on how many subs they get is on their viewership. Like because the viewership is really what's more telling of people actually watching your content, because you can you can fuck around and buy, if you really want, a bunch of subscriptions just to make it look like you have a lot of people watching you. So you can have people with like 100,000, like you might have someone like say like 500,000 subs, and then you look at their videos and it's like 100 views. So something's off with that. If you got like 500,000 subs and you got only 100 views per video, there's something wrong with that. So is now they they is more looking at the amount of time people watch your content and how many people watch your content as opposed to merely subs. That's that's old. Like basing it on just how many subs you got. That's YouTube 10 years ago. Where this is YouTube now. Do I collect a lot of stuff like that? Says Goob and Scrap dash Q8V. Yeah, whole bunch of stuff. Like I said, if you want, check out one of my uh, videos. Like so, I have different selections of videos. Like I have travel stuff, I have nerdy stuff, um, and I have martial arts stuff, and I have martial arts myths. So go into nerdy stuff, and you'll see like me showing a whole bunch of my collectibles. I have toy collectibles. I have collectible stuff that's like stuff I've collected while in Asia, or my martial arts weapons that I train with. This is more cosplayish, and you'll see along with something like this, I have like batarangs, like the from the Dark Knight trilogy, that are actually sharp. Like they're actually sharp. Actually, I have them right here. It's in my little EDC sling bag right here. Sorry. Um, then after this, I'm gonna get to the actual topic because this is not even the topic. Where are they? That what part of this bag it's in. Mm, 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 mm. Okay. Trying to remember what part of my EDC sling bag it's in. It should be in the main compartment. It's my cat tourniquet. Oh, it's right here. So yeah, the little Dark Knight batarangs. They were selling these at the Comic Con too. It's like everything, like so all of these that I saw at the Comic Con, I was like, I gotta get these, and I bought multiple of these. I still have one in my place in in the Philippines, and I have like two of these here. I have this one, and I have another one that's in my storage bin with some of my other stuff. And then I have another one where it's just a single, where it's not a whole package, just a single that I have in my Batman book bag, and it's only a single because I was tricked when I ordered it on eBay. I thought it was a pack because that's what they displayed on the image, and then when they sent it to me, it was just one. I'm like, oh, okay, you got me. So, but yeah, these are actually sharp. So, not I had to actually because these are sharp, I had to actually insulate the inside of this with duct tape because these things are sharp, so it was cutting through the very pack that's holding it. And so these are like batarang shurikens, but you would more like real shuriken. You would rarely actually throw them at people. You would just hold them in your hand and use them to stab at someone, um, or you could use it as to dig. Um, and if you did throw them at someone, you would basically they're not going to like it's not going to be like those old 80s movies where you throw a shuriken into someone's head and it kills them. That doesn't work like that. at most you just use it as a distraction tool. You throw it and it's a distraction tool. It diverts their attention, and then you hit them with the real weapon you were intending to do them in with, or you could hit them in the head with it or something. But whatever. But that's the extent of shuriken. Like if you actually took shuriken jutsu, like you would learn like all the stuff you see in those old 80s and 90s ninja movies. That's not how they were really used. Like samurai, pretty much um, ninja if you want, but really just samurai. But they would use them in their hand to like you know as a stabbing tool, or again throw it as a diversion. But it is my EDC sling bag, a whole bunch of stuff I keep in here. But it's not just little goofy stuff like that. Like I said, I got real useful stuff in here, like my cat tourniquet. You should, if you have an EDC sling bag, you should definitely have a cat tourniquet. Put this. Plus, I like cat tourniquets because they're the easiest to apply. You can apply them with one hand, which is good because if you are injured, say you get shot or stabbed or something, you you can apply it with one hand. You don't need both hands to apply it. So cat tourniquets are very easy to apply. So I got other things here like a little. Yes, I'm a Batman fan, and obviously Wolverine as well. That's my second favorite superhero, and my third is Spider-Man. Ironically, I have all three of them right here. Boom, boom, boom. My favorite non-superhero, uh, Luke Skywalker, is Jedi Luke Skywalker here. My favorite version of him, because that's when he reached the stage of becoming a Jedi Knight. Anyway, I know y'all. Well, I didn't come here to nerd out. Not on this. Not for this stream anyway. We can do that on future streams, but this wasn't about me nerding out. Although I don't mind. I also got my little Smithsonian space shuttle here from the Smithsonian Space Air and Space Museum in DC. Um, but let me go through these comments and I'm gonna get to the topic du jour. Oh, he says an Alex Jones clip. Look it up. Okay, that sounds like something Alex Jones would say. That does sound like something he would say. Honestly, thank you for clearing that up. Side knives 6820. Thanks. Yeah, that sounds about apropos. Uh, King Wallonia is just a tip. 302 Key says, why are you I think you mean abstaining. You missed the S with the obtaining from sex. But 302 Keys, I'm not abstaining. I'm married. That's why I have a wedding ring on. And I was in a fraternity. Trust me, I didn't abstain from sex. That's all I'll say. I'm not going to give war stories. Question, do you like to eat Wendy's? Not really. Like, uh, really, I could probably count on my hands how many times I've eaten at Wendy's, at least here in America. Here in America, like, and I mean going back to like as a kid, probably like 20 at best, 20 times at best, and I mean since I was a kid, not like just as an adult. I mean since I was a kid at best, probably like 20 times. Now I like them overseas in the Philippines because like I was telling someone the other day, like fast food overseas is completely different because the ingredients are much more they use more healthier ingredients overseas, which is why I salute to Secretary of Health Robert F. Kennedy, who's trying to make our food healthy, because the FDA and the CDC didn't give a fuck about how unhealthy our food are, because these lobbyists from food um, these food organizations, pay them off to like not give a shit about basically poisoning us. You know, 302 Keys. Why are you still at it? Like, dude, I'm married. How am I a virgin? Give it up. Like, you're clearly projecting your own insecurities. Uh, William Charles Snyder says, "I wish I didn't have common sense. You seem so happy." Mm, so happy for you. It seems well, I'll paraphrase Rene Descartes on this. Everyone is so self everyone is so satisfied that they have an abundance of good sense, that they never search for more of it. That seems to be your problem too, William. uh Good, and Scraps says, "Hey, I gotta go. Hope you have a good rest of your night today." Appreciate it. Thanks. It is actually getting late, so I'm gonna get to this topic pretty soon, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. It's gonna be pretty quickly because I've talked about this before anyway. Wise up. Oh yeah, I haven't seen you in a while, but I remember this your username. He said, "What's up, broski? Your lives and videos have kept me going while I recover from a serious foot infection, osteomyelitis." Oh, that sounds like a bone. That actually sounds like something. That sounds serious. He said, "Please keep the videos going much as you can because I'm in a bad situation." You got it. Uh, Romero Tempest says you can be happy with common sense. So the guy was attempting to be clever. Romero. He was basically trying to say I'm stupid, and he thought that he was saying it in a clever way, but he was just revealing how dumb he is. Um, Anyone who does have common sense never is satisfied that they have so much of it that they can't use more of it. On top of that, uh, if he was actually clever, he would have quoted the old quotation from John Stuart Mill, which is, "I'd rather be uh, Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied." But he wasn't really clever enough to think of that because he's not really that clever. He's just a idiot troll. So anyway, getting to the actual topic, which is um, talking about the gender war, the so-called gender war, and the title is basically, there wasn't a gender war until men started sharing their stories. Okay, and that's basically how I feel about that. Like, and and I won't take credit. I'm gonna give a shout out to Ask a Brother podcast with Jeff St. James. He's a black male clinical psychologist, and he's one of the rare clinical psychologists that actually give a masculine perspective for his clients. Because let's face it, a lot of helping psychology is quite feminized. If anyone watches the Ask a Brother podcast, or if know him, give him a shout out for me. Tell him, hey, I said what's up. I'd love to come on his show sometimes, on this podcast, and chop it up. you know. But in any case, um, he's often related the fact that that with the red pill space and the manosphere, like a lot of women hate the red pill and the manosphere YouTube content, and they really hate guys who watch that sort of content. The reason being is because it takes when they do, it takes the it pulls the veil away, and they don't like that. Um, they like all this talk about the gender war, like going back like 5 6 years ago, whenever, probably longer than that. I didn't really pay attention to it honestly till 4 years ago. Thank you, Keisha and Tucker, for the GIF. Matter of fact, thank you. I actually need to set a GIF goal. I keep forgetting to do that. I'm gonna set that now, and the reward will be a martial arts technique as per last time. So thank you. Actually reminded me. So again, so this stream isn't to dump on women at all. It's just to say that there are some disingenuous people who, when talking about the gender war, they're basically just saying that guys aren't that the guys shouldn't be sharing their side of the story. Now, to be clear, there are some dudes in the manosphere that go way too far, and they're just a bunch of guys in the He-Man Women Haters Club. So we're this is not to be this is not to say this is not to like shit on all women. This is just to say I think that guys have every right to share their views and opinions on relationships and the different uh, gender politics and stuff from a male perspective. Thank you. That's two. So I need 8 more so I can hit that goal, and I will share a martial arts technique. And if you didn't, and if you want a clue to how that went, I have a video from last week when I hit my goal and I taught a technique. And then I clipped, and then you don't have to watch the whole live stream. I actually clipped that part, and did a highlight um, on my YouTube shorts, showing me doing the martial arts technique. Where I was basically showing people like a little basic self defense technique that doesn't take like 5 years to master. It's something you could use right away. I thought that would be a good one for my first time showing people techniques. So 8 more to go, and I'll be showing you guys a martial arts technique, a different one than last time. Okay. Um. So anyway, and the other thing that's disingenuous about the whole gender war thing is it was okay. It was okay for women. Again, not all women. Like I have to clear that up because when you say women, people think you're by extension making it uh you're putting the qualifier all or every onto women. I'm not using all or every. I'm using some. So when I say women, just know that the qualifier is some women, not all. Okay. So anyway, there were women like oh, thank you, Ramiro. He said, I hope you make it, brother, especially getting on the podcast. See you later. Appreciate it. I should have done this earlier, by the way. But thank you though. Thank you for the gift. Uh, but anyway, they had no problem shitting on men for 50 years, and 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 they did it way more publicly than we did. Like we're doing it through like online content creation like YouTube and Rumble, uh, stuff like that. YouTube being the biggest like platform for content creators. Even though you have others like Kick and Rumble, TikTok, um, Instagram, Instagram Reels and Instagram Live, whatever. Snapchat, you can do content creation on there now, all that sort of stuff. Um, but like they had no problem shitting on men, particularly black men. Not so. Not only was it they were shitting on men, but they were particularly coming down on black men for the past 50 years. Like since like the late 70s, you had these daytime talk shows like Oprah Winfrey, Sally Jesse Raphael, Donahue, Ricky Lake, Jenny Jones. Um, remember, Jenny Jones could get it, and it was funny too because when she was when they revealed her age, I was like, "Yo, Jenny is 50." I was like, "She could get it though." And this was like, shit, this was like 30 years ago. This was like back in 1996, 1997. So damn, she old as shit now. If hopefully she's still alive, but damn, she's like damn near 80 now. But yo, she was bad because she was in her 50s, and I could have swore she was like early 30s back then. But that's neither here nor there. But the issue is again, like all these little daytime talk shows used to just dunk on men, particularly black men, saying, they're all criminals, they all cheat, they're all gay. It's like, is it? Well, no, I mean, like they're all criminals, they all cheat, and if not, they're gay or locked up. Um, they're all deadbeat dads, especially Oprah. She was a big proponent of that until like actual statistics defeated that claim, showing that actually black men are the most involved in their children's lives of race of the different racial categories in America. Like black men were the most involved with their children in their children's lives. That defeated that whole narrative stemming all the way back to the early 80s that black men were deadbeat dads. Um, and like I said, this was pushed by people like Oprah. And she has always been full of shit. Like this ain't gonna be a dunk on Oprah's session, but it could easily be so because her talk show was just low quality information that she put out all the time, and she did the most when like trying to shit on black men, and she marketed her but she marketed her show basically to like middle-aged white women. That's how she became successful. Black women watched her too, but yeah, but you had daytime talk shows, you had movies, you had books. Um, all these were talking about men ain't shit. Um, and again, this was usually aimed particularly at black men. Not like they took swipes at men generally, but it was aimed more poignantly at black men. And so now with the creation of the manosphere, like around 10 years ago or whenever, and then the uh the sub the I guess sub uh space of the manosphere, the black manosphere, or the black YouTube space, all these guys started sharing, their views on things. And like I said, some of them went too far, but so what? So the women went way too far too. Like I remember when they was saying, look, I remember literally back in the '90s when these women had everyone believing that black men were an endangered species, and they literally used that term. They literally said that black men were an endangered species. They used to say, yeah, black men are an endangered species. Like they said most of them are either locked up or dead. I'm like, wait, what? How? I saw no I know I saw no shortage of black males when I was coming up. What happened was a lot of these women couldn't get the men that they wanted, so for them, they saw a dearth of black men. That sounded like that was a personal problem, not a problem with the general population of black men. But yeah, they used to learn. But yeah, if you look at content from the '90s, women used to spread that shit all the time, saying, "Oh, black men are an endangered species." Like how, bitch? Like we're all over the place. I had my father and a stepfather, an abundance of uncles and older cousins. Yes, a few of them did die. Yes, a few of them did get locked up, but that wasn't the majority, and many of them are still here, including my father. Well, my stepfather died, but that was from well, he died of emphysema because he was a heavy chain smoker, and I had even I unfortunately, I mean, as a kid, I even asked him to stop smoking because he used to smoke in the car, and I would try to roll down the window. He was like, "Don't roll down the window." I was like, "Well, the smoke is stifling." I was like, "It can kill you." He's like, "Well, you're gonna die anyway, eventually." I'm like, "Is that what you say to a kid?" But that's how baby boomers. That's how baby boomers thought. They didn't care. They never cared about anyone other than themselves, and that's still the case with baby boomers. I won't even get into that. I've already done a video talking about why black baby boomers suck. So you can check out that video if you want. But I've already done a video on why black baby boomers suck. I'll probably do another video on that again. But uh, yeah, he died, and like I said, as a kid, I wanted him to stop smoking. He actually did end up stop smoking like 2 years before he died. It was too late. My uncle, he was a heavy smoker too. He, he's been battling cancer for the past couple of years. But again, back in the early '80s, again smoking in the car, and you shouldn't smoke in the car with a kid anyway. But again, they don't care. And I was like, you shouldn't smoke in a car. It's unhealthy. And he had the same response as my stepfather. You going? He just, something will eventually kill you. So, and now he's dealing with, he's still struggling with cancer. Um, my grandmother, she was a heavy smoker. She's still around. She's actually in her 80s, but she's had poor health for the past, you know, she's been in bad health for the past 30 years. But she's never taken care of her health, and most black people don't take fitness seriously. They don't take nutrition and fitness seriously whatsoever. So that's another thing. They don't care about diet and nutrition and all that sort of stuff until they're literally in the doctor's office and they're being told what they need to do to stave off some serious disease. And then they're acting like, oh, these doctors can't do anything for me. It's kind of your fault. Like you can't, like you mistreat your body for 40, 50 years, and then you think it's still supposed to run optimally like it did as when you were younger. That's not realistic. If you treated a car the same way, you wouldn't expect that car to still run optimally. Why should your body be any different? Your body is just a fine-tuned machine as well. Anyway, getting back to my point. Um, so yeah, these folks in the 80s and 90s, mostly women and gay men, had no problem shitting on black men for the longest of time. Like I said, we were deadbeat dads. We were an endangered species. We all cheated. We were locked up or dead or gay. Um, there was no good black men around unless they accept the married ones. Well, yeah, because that means that the good ones didn't want you. Duh. But they don't think that they don't think, hmm, what what is the common denominator in all my problems? Is it all these men? Are all these men like, I don't know? Let's use Alf. principles of reasoning here. Are all of these men the problem, or me, or am I being the common denominator with in all these different relationships with all these different people? Am I the problem? They never think that. On some level, I think they probably do realize it's them, and that's what makes them bitter. But yeah, but again, for the past 50 years, since like the late 70s, they had no problem shitting on men. And yes, going back to the 70s, because you used to have like used to have songs dogging black men even back in the 70s. You gotta have a J.O.B. if you wanna get with me. All this sort of shit. Like that goes back to the late 70s, early 70s rather. And like I said, it really ratcheted it up in the 80s with all the daytime talk shows, and then all these little you know uh, movies that catered to black women and stuff like that. So that's where we are. So then, fast forward 50 years later, and with the rise of YouTube and the ability for independent content creators to come on and make content sharing their views on life, sharing the struggles that men have, the manosphere came out of what was called the men's rights movement. So the manosphere was like the evolution of the whole men's rights movement in the early 2010s. And at the time, I just thought, I'll be honest, like when I first saw the men's rights movement and stuff like that, I just thought it was patently ridiculous. I was like, what? But uh, to be clear, I was like a left leaning progressive at that time. I'm not anymore. Um, and so, you know, being that I'm always in the pursuit of reason, my beliefs do evolve through searching for better ideas and and having and then once the light of and then also when the light of evidence falls upon the things that I already hold to be true, and that light of evidence shows that they're not true, I adjust accordingly. I don't stick to views that I that the light of evidence can't support. And so a lot of my leftist views have gone out the window. Now, to be clear, I still consider myself a classical liberal, but a classical liberal is not the same as a liberal in today's terms. Like a classical liberal is someone who's going to find themselves more aligned with like conservatism or libertarianism, right? Because the views of classical liberalism aren't held by liberals anymore. Things like freedom of speech and thought and expression, um, political freedom, um, religious freedom, uh, pursuit of reason, um, the scientific advancement, uh, the these sorts of things aren't held by the left anymore. The reason I was on the left because I mis I mistakenly thought that the left held those views. They did like 30 plus years ago. Like that's why I will always joke and say I'm just a liberal from 1995, because that's when I think it was more aligned with where I am right now. But clearly, the liberals have shifted leftwards uh, uh, of that center. So, anywho, like I said, being left leaning at the time, you know, I just kind of shit on the men's right movement without looking too far into it. But I think it did become more, I think it did become more coherent when it moved online and became the manosphere, right? And then the red pill, which is um, kind of roughly synonymous with the manosphere. But in in that space, you also had black content creators in that red pill and manosphere space, and that became what the black manosphere or black YouTube. And I don't even claim the black manosphere anymore because I think they were I think a lot of them were disingenuous. A lot of them, you know, a lot of them are self-serving and um, petty and not too intelligent. I saw a lot of them casting shade on Kevin Samuels before he died because he had became so popular within the manosphere that he was bigger than the black manosphere, and they felt as if he had took their ideas and capitalized on it in a way that they couldn't. So that left a lot of them feeling kind of salty about it. Also, you know, before he had passed, he said he was moving beyond the black manosphere himself. Like he wanted to go beyond that and spread his message. Um, which I mean, he should. Like he was already at like 1 million subs on YouTube, 1 million subs on Instagram, and I think he was on. And I think at the time he had moved on, he had started on TikTok as well, and was doing well there. So he was already dominating on 3 different platforms, and his message had reached a lot of people just beyond black men. Like he had a bunch of um, men in other countries that watched him and and really liked his content. Not only that, he had women that liked him as well, despite what many people think. There was a lot of women that liked Kevin Samuels. There were a lot of celebrities that supported him too, but some of them had to do it like more. They couldn't be too out front with it because it, you know, might mess. Because a lot of them, you know, a lot of these male entertainers had, you know, a lot of their audience were women, so it would mess with them. Like, you know, people like uh Ti for once. Like Ti was going to do something with him. He did do a music video with Future, uh, and what's the singer Amarion. Amarion supported him. I was surprised. Like Amarion, I was like, okay. But yeah, he had a lot of. He even said that he had a lot of celebrity support, but he couldn't name them because you know they wanted to keep their anonymity because of their celebrity status. And when you know when you talk about celebrity status, you're talking about like a lot of men whose half their audience or more than half their audience is made up of women. And so you know at the time when at the rise of Kevin Samuels' fame, a lot of women, you know, on social media would castigate men who liked or followed Kevin Samuels. It was like, you know, they would put in their profiles or in their dating apps, if you like Kevin Samuels, don't even talk to me. Like, bitch, fuck you. No one cares. If anything, the guy saw that as a red flag. The guy was like, so the guys flipped it on them. They was like, well, if you don't like a man who follows Kevin Samuels, then that's a red flag about you. Meaning there's a flaw that you don't want being exposed. Um, I don't care about your little retarded stuff you talking about here, bro. Go take your autistic ass somewhere else. Anywho, so yeah, I don't have time for special ed people. Anyway, getting back. Yeah, you're going on timeout. Come back when you grew like 10 IQ points. Bye bye. Retard. Most trolls, like I said, guys, a lot of trolls are autistic. And I'm sorry, I'm not gonna try to be nice. A lot of them are autistic. Or they come from the dark triad of they have traits from the dark triad of personality. The dark triad of personality is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Um, these people have mental health problems, and this is why they have. I mean, who think about it? What sort of healthy-minded individual comes online just to harass like content creators or people in like online discussion threads on like things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok? Like these people are losers in real life, or they're retarded like this guy, bubonic plague. So I'll call them out for what they are, retarded. And yes, I can say the word because YouTube, after the Trump election, realized that people value freedom of speech. Cal Surprise. Anyway, still need to hit those gifts, guys. Still need 8 more to go. Got less than four, less than 5 minutes left. I might restart that goal to keep it going. Do, 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 yeah. So anyway, so like I said, Kevin Samuels became like the most prominent person in the Black manosphere at the time, even though he didn't started it. He didn't start it, excuse me. And a lot of his messages he did borrow from other content creators, and usually he would give them. I mean, maybe he didn't always, but he often did um, shout out the people with whom he took inspiration from, right? So um, after his death, it was sort of like this. The manosphere kind of splintered. It was sort of like with the death of Superman in the '90s, the in the early '90s when you had the death of Superman. After the death of Superman, there was like this void for like a leader for the superheroes. Like Batman was a leader in a sense, but not in the way that Superman was. Like Superman was that anchor that you know if like any any superhero in the triumvirate of superheroes would leave a void in the superhero space in DC Comics and within all of comic book superheroes generally, but specifically in the DC superheroes. Like if you if you offed Superman, if you offed Batman, if you offed Wonder Woman, there would be a void left from either one of them because they set the they set the tone for every other superhero, both both within the within their fictional universe and within the comic book space as well. Like they were the template for all other superheroes, right? Like Superman was the very first superhero and the template for all superpowered individuals. Batman was the template for like the super the superhero slash detective noir type person who doesn't have superpowers. Wonder Woman was the template for like a female for the female superheroes. When Superman left, it left a void, and after his death, there was this era called the Reign of Superman, where it was like all these little like imitations of Superman. Like there was like cyborg Superman. There was like this new. There was this Superboy who was a clone of Superman using both his DNA and Lex Luthor's DNA. There was like this black guy who um, used um, high tech gadgetry to affect like superpowers, and there was a few others, but they weren't quite the same as actually having Superman. That's kind of what happened in the Black Manosphere when Kevin Samuels died. You had a bunch of people trying to be similar to him in some ways, but really didn't. It really wasn't the same ever since. And what made me finally deject the Black Manosphere was when they elected a white woman to be the queen of the Black Manosphere. You know what I'm talking about, just pearly things. All of a sudden, she stole all Kevin Samuels' talking points, and then she started a podcast that was basically like Fresh and Fit's podcast in Miami. She she affected that, but she took it to London where she did it, and all the like basically all these other black uh, black male content creators in the black YouTube space were wanting to work with her and use and like would clip would clip her videos, and I'm like, really? So you guys are all like hailing a white woman who's has no experience in the that like she's just stealing talking points. Like she had she was a rich white girl from the Midwest. She's never been in the black community. She's never dealt with black issues. She didn't know anything about black men other than the fat black guy she used to date, a fat homeless black dude that she was dating at the time. At least I've seen a short trailer for the new He-Man movie. Yeah, that is actually pretty dope. Wise up. I'm still undecided whether I'm going to go see it based on that trailer. I'll probably just watch it by sailing the seven seas, you know, aka piracy, because I'm not I'm not convinced yet that it's worth going to see in the theaters yet. I might have to see something more because right now it just looks too it looks too MCU ish to me. But anyway, getting back to the topic. Um, uh, and I only diverted the top because he's been a loyal follower. But anyway, anyone else, if you want to divert the topic, you gotta drop it in a super chat. The only time I respond to random questions is usually on my Ask Me Anything videos. When I do my Ask Me Anything lives, then you can ask me random questions. But when I'm doing a specific topic, if you are dropping a question not germane to the topic, you gotta put it in a super chat if you please. But yeah, guys, so I was disgusted with the Manosphere. Like, first of all, like I said, it was a lot of low quality content coming out of the Black Manosphere, and that's why they were salty with Kevin Samuels. He put a lot of money and thought into his content. He had it edited. Um, he sent it out to get edited by I believe O'Shea Duke Jackson did a lot of his editing of his videos. Um, he you know he researched the topics before he did them. Um, he came well prepared and actually created a nice little aura in his videos. Like he would suit up for his videos, and he would have like his little studio surroundings with like candles and stuff like that, and not just any candles. Like these were like scented or brand name candles And people used to wonder why he used to always talk about different fragrances and different candles, but he was getting sponsored by those people to do so. He was being sponsored to drop those names in his video, so he was doing big things. And a lot of people in the Black Manosphere were salty because he had his shit together and they didn't. That's their fault, not him. uh, then of course people were calling him gay, even though he was like, you know, dude was a dude was a bit of a Mac. I mean, yeah, he didn't come off super masculine, but you don't have to act super alpha to be masculine. As a matter of fact, the ones who gotta try to be all tough are usually the ones who's probably in the closet. Just saying, because they're like overcompensating. But yeah, and plus he was an image consultant, so like that's why he was more on that whole fragrances and fashion and um and he was uh an educated man, so he was articulate. So you know, automatically and this is one of those degenerate things in the black community. Like articulate black men are always accused of being gay. If you're an articulate black man, you're either accused of being gay, acting white, something of the sort, or both. It happens. And again, these are the experiences that black men talk about. But like I said, I am still a black content creator, but I don't consider myself part of the black manosphere just because I saw themselves sell their souls to this little white she devil 3 years ago. And it's like she had no experience in what she was talking about whatsoever. Now she claims she has experience because she's talked to so many people about these issues. And yeah, I'll give her that she, you know, she says the right stuff a lot of times on these issues. But when she was talking about specifically black male issues, it was just disingenuous because again, she was a rich white girl. What experience? Like, how did she know what black men are going through? Like it, like I said, it was just really disingenuous. She was smart enough that she would study this stuff, and again, she would make her videos, and she would have black people on her show to give, to use as a sounding board on these issues. But the way the black manosphere basically like kowtowed to her was sick. Even though Shea Duke Jackson did at one point, he was like, "I'm not going to hate on her because she's putting in the work." And then after Dennis Sperling, who was a close friend of Kevin Samuels and an attorney, and a success in his own right in his personal business, more so than online, um, he was like, he was the first one out there criticizing all these guys in the black manosphere, basically bending the knee to Pearl. And then all of a sudden, after Dennis Sperling kind of sparked that initial backlash, then all of these guys in the black manosphere started turning that back on Pearl after they were willing to work with her at the time, and did work with her at the time, and bigged her up. And some people still big her up, like Anton Daniels bitch ass. And we see what happened to him. He got it, he got fucking trashed on by Corey Holcomb. So um this is kind of a diversion. I'm just kind of giving like a background into like the black manosphere and all that sort of stuff, and how they did, you know, um, how the black manosphere tried to respond to the gender dynamics in the black community, because for the longest time it was like women had more pull in the black community than the black men did. And that came out again around the 60s and 70s, when a lot of black women chose welfare over men because that to receive that Section 8 housing, you couldn't have a man in the house, right? Malcolm X said in his autobiography that if that welfare destroyed his family, and he believed that welfare was was would destroy the black community, and we saw that happening as he predicted. This is why today a lot of people consider Malcolm X a black conservative, even though he wouldn't consider himself probably a black conservative, but he had a lot of the same viewpoints as black conservatives do today. But both in the movie made by Spike Lee and in his book, he talked about how um, the welfare programs by the federal government, by the government, destroyed his family and was destroying the black community. It was like one of the first times we would hear stuff like this coming from him, coming from the Nation of Islam, particularly from Farrakhan, the Minister Farrakhan. Not that I agree with a lot of stuff that Farrakhan says, because he often says some anti-Semitic stuff. But aside from that, like, you know, and also I didn't agree with a lot of the black nationalism stuff that came out of the Nation of Islam, but because they are also one of those people that said, "Oh, you shouldn't date outside your race" and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not with all that. Um, but yeah, the so-called gender war was basically, it wasn't a war until men started expressing their own viewpoints. Jay Simpson says, if you go back, Malcolm X, MLK, and JFK would all be considered conservative by today's standard. I know. Well, you weren't here like probably 10 minutes ago, but I was just literally saying that although by today's standards, I'm I'm conservative, I still consider myself a classical liberal. But I was like, if you go back, like like I said, if you go back to 1995, I'm the sort of liberal who you would have saw in 1995, but by today's standards, uh, because the because politics have moved to the left in in the general population, particularly among the educated elite. Um, they've shifted so much leftward that I will be now considered conservative, even though I consider myself a classical liberal. And just 3 years ago, when I did a political survey, I was like over 96 or so percent progressive. But progressives demand like ideological purity. Like if you're on the right on any issue, you like you can't be one of them. Like they demand purity. Whereas at least on the right they don't demand purity. If you're with them on one or two issues, they welcome you with open arms. Like they'll just they'll just turn a blind eye to your other left-leaning beliefs as long as you're with them on certain things. Like if you're if you're with them on things like abortion or gun rights, or you know being tough on crime, stuff like that, like they'll welcome you with open arms. But progressives on the other side, if you're not with them on every single issue, they like, oh no, you're not a real progressive, you're a fake progressive. So I had enough of that. Plus, like they were just killing me with the LGBTQ shit. I couldn't rock with it. You it's like you were just telling you you were trying to make people believe that mentally ill men should be considered women. Like I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. Anyway, getting back to the topic. J. Simpson, 1995 lib, is now an independent. Pre 1965, 90% of Democrats are now considered Republican. Well, I can't speak about 65, but I can 1965, but I can definitely speak of 1995, when I was still 17 at the time, and I became politically active. And well, I yeah, well, I turned 18 at the end of 1995. Did I? Yeah. So that's when I turned 18 in 1995. Um, and when I first so the funny thing is when I first registered to vote, I registered as a Republican, but I was a liberal Republican, and that wasn't an oxymoron at the time because there were liberal Republicans at the time. They were basically people who were socially liberal, but maybe tended to be more fiscally conservative. Um, and I chose Republican because my father was a Republican, and I figured, well, if he's Republican, he must know something. So I went with what he was. Obviously, this is why it's important to have fathers in young men's lives. So yeah, but and once I went to college, I switched to the Green Party, so I went completely left. Um, when I was in college, but then I realized I didn't really like the Green Party because they were a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I just like Ralph Nader, so I switched to the Democrat Party, even though I still favored Ralph Nader if he were to run for election again. And remember, they tried to blame him for Al Gore losing, which that wasn't the case. Like, if Al Gore really made his case with the general public, he would have won, despite there being um, a third party candidate, because Ralph Nader didn't really take any of the electoral votes away from Al Gore when you looked at the total. Like, he barely took any electoral votes. Now, it was different back in the 90s with Ross Perot. Now, Ross Perot actually had a chance to beat both Bush and Clinton back in what was that? In was that 88? The first election when he ran against George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. Um, and Clinton won because people were mad at Bush because he said no new taxes, and he had to raise taxes because of the recession and all that good stuff. Um, and then, but Perot had a good chance of winning, but he dropped out, uh, and then tried to come back, and people didn't take him seriously. So then he ran a second time, and he didn't get the same numbers he got the first time. But the first time around, back in the election of '88, he almost could have won. But yeah, I'm an independent as well. I think we talked about this already. Um, the, and like I said, the problem with being an independent is um, in some states like Maryland, you can't participate in the primaries. So whatever. Jay says I'm independent, so I see every issue and weigh its merits on its arguments. Yeah, I think independent, being a political independent, and actually, if you look at the stats, political stats right now, there is an increase of registered voters becoming independent. Um, the two parties are losing ground, and that's a good thing. Um, because it's hard again to think critically on different political issues if you're partisan. If you're a partisan, it's going to be hard to not be biased one way or the other. I mean, you're still going to have political biases, but what I mean is when you are so strongly affiliated with a particular party, you tend to see things strictly through their lens, and that obfuscates the ability to think critically. Jay says Gore lost because he went all climate change crazy. Well, if you look at it now, Gore was actually right. We like everyone thought he was cuckoo, but he was actually right when he did that documentary back in 1999. he was actually right. Like he, like, uh, looking at it in hindsight, he was right. What he predicted is coming to pass now. The world is warmer. We have more. Um, the global warming has affected climate change, which has changed environments around the world. And look, the Pentagon took it seriously because um, within the Pentagon, they had to actually look at scenarios of what would happen through climate change because they knew climate change would actually cause global some global um, problems as certain nations would deal with um, a lack of food resources and stuff like that. It will cause problems with refugees and political instability due to scarce resources and different places fighting for those scarce resources. Not to mention like affecting like uh, island nations, stuff like that. And we see that now with some of these Pacific islands where they're actually losing a lot as the sea levels rise due to global warming. Um, we see a lot of erosion of these islands. Even Indonesia, like they're moving their capital, which was in Jakarta, to Java because Jakarta is sinking. Not well, that's part. Well, Jakarta is sinking, and Java has the larger population now within Indonesia. So because of that, they've moved, or they are moving the capital from Jakarta to Java. So I mean, so global change is a real thing, and Gore was right. What the reason Gore didn't win was because he took it for granted that he had the vote of minorities. Like I remember the attorney Randall Robinson was saying that he didn't like how smug Gore was when he was talking to black people. Like he was already sure that they already had that he already had their vote intact. A lot of smug white Democrats have thought that way, and that's not so much the case now. With a lot of black people leaning independent, a lot of black men now leaning independent and conservative. Um, like mo- most masculine males aren't Democrat anymore. Um, Jay says in the past decade, the two party system has come under attack for that reason. Tea Party, the Black Caucus, AOC, and her group of crazies. The two parties are splitting. No, so what happened? So the Democrats were trying to make themselves the big tent party of everyone, but when you try to include everyone, you don't address particular things that people want. So you're gonna see the Democrat Party, if it continues to grow, it's gonna fracture into two different parties. I mean, but that was happening with the Republican Party too. It houses a bunch of people. As well as the Republican Party got bigger, it became fractionary as well. Like you have your MAGA here, you have your libertarians, um, you have your alt right, then you have your moderates, and most of the Republicans are moderates. But like I said, you also have your alt right folks here, and your MAGA um, and ultra conservatives, and your center right, like moderate conservatives and all that. So there's a bunch of different people, and I mean we have multiple third party groups, but outside of the Libertarian Party and the Green Party, most of them don't really put up enough numbers to like do anything in a presidential election. You'll see them in local and state elections winning seats, but it's just unrealistic for at this point for a third party candidate to win like a presidential election. This is why Bernie Sanders, when he ran for president, he chose the Democratic Party, even though um, he's actually an independent in the Senate. He's actually an independent, but when he ran for for president, he chose the Democratic Party. Um, but anyway, so getting back to that, so yeah, a lot of these content creators, leaned conservative, or or at least politically on the right. A lot of these black male content creators, and they spoke against a lot of the bullshit they saw in the black community. How it was very matrilineal, uh, how you know these this preponderance of single black mothers were destroying the community, because a fatherless community is a dangerous place. The the lack of father, like not just a father, lacking a father in the home, but when you have a community that lacks fathers within that community, because when at least when you have fathers in the community, even if that particular household doesn't have a father, there are father figures in that community that will that the other black kids can look up to. Well, and we've seen that, like when you have like these black male teachers, and all the black kids are fawning over the black male teacher. We did that. Like whenever we had like a black male teacher, that was usually like our favorite teacher, right? Because a lot of black kids lack black fathers in their lives. So when they had a black male teacher or a coach, or something, something like that, they, you know, some black male figure in their life, it was a positive, it was a positive thing. So, uh, Jay says, afraid when the left gets to left and the far right moves to far equals violence, hence the past few years to today. Yeah, but so like I was saying, so this was a this was a healthy balance of the scales when these guys came onto YouTube and other online spaces and started expressing their frustrations with relationships and the black community. Live was saying the black community is degenerate, and it was. I mean, because we were talking about that. I'm not we, but there like there were men talking about these issues 60 years ago. Like I said, starting with people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Like Martin Luther King himself said, like 60 years ago, that the black church was in danger of becoming irrelevant to black men. Martin Luther King said that himself 60 plus years ago. He said the black church was in danger of becoming irrelevant to black men. And fast forward to now, you don't see too many black men in the church. There are a lot of black men who uh, who hold, who have strong religious beliefs, but a lot of them aren't actually in the church, because the churches mostly cater to black women. And on top of that, a lot of these pastors act like ersatz pimps. Like a lot of them, like their congregation are mostly a bunch of women fawning over them. Like everything the pastor, yes, pastor, yes, pastor. um, and so, that's been called out, And like I said, Martin Luther King himself said 60 something years ago, black church was in danger of becoming irrelevant to black men. And like I said, you had people like Malcolm X saying that welfare is destroying the black community, saying how it literally destroyed his black community. I mean, destroyed his family when his father was murdered by I believe Klansmen or white supremacists because he was a civil rights activist at the time. Um, and you had these social workers working with his mother, and they ripped the family apart. Like they took away some of his siblings and put them in I think foster care or orphanages or something like that. His mom ended up having a mental breakdown and being put in a psychiatric hospital. And they used to basically um, terrorize the family to keep them so that she could keep welfare to to feed her kids. Jay says in MLK days, black men held families together, provided and had meaningful families. True. Um, yeah. I mean, it was a lot of variables, so it's not just one thing in particular. Because for one, back in the 50s and 60s, you could have a single family income support an entire family. One of the problems of all these women going of all these women going in into the into employment was that it doubled the labor force, which means it cheapened how much people could pay you. When you double the labor force, you cheapen the amount that you have to pay them. Of course, women were never that big on economics and common sense and money, but anyway, you double the labor force, you make them less essential. Um, so it became harder to provide for a family. Uh, Also, again, most at that time in the 50s and 60s, most black families had were married families. There were more, most most couples back then were married at the time. You couldn't just shack up or um, cohabitate. That was frowned upon. And if you not, and abortion wasn't readily available then, and you didn't have like a dozen different forms of of different forms of birth control methods on the market. Like you had the pill, the condom. That's it, pretty much. And the diaphragm, I guess, IUD. But most women didn't use the IUD. Some had a diaphragm, but majority was either a condom, the pill, or raw dog. And by far, raw dog was the most common. And so, usually, when you knocked a woman up, there was a shotgun wedding. Either there was a shotgun wedding, or what happened is they they sent that they sent that girl down. If she was like of young age, usually they just sent her down south somewhere to have the kid, you know, so not to bring shame on the family or whatever. But yeah, most black couples back then in the 50s and 60s were still married. But like I said, that started to change in the 60s and the 70s when more women were relying on welfare, like food stamps, Section 8, TANF, and all those other sorts of programs. And like I said, part of the requirements of Section 8 is you couldn't have a man in the house. So they chose those welfare programs over having a man in their life. And then with the dynamics in the community shifting towards women having more leverage through using social welfare programs, they saw men as more transactional. Hold up, let me. Clara says there are different forms of welfare. It's the American model that performs very poorly. Yeah, I'm not. When I say welfare, I'm referring to the. I'm using it as an umbrella term for all the different government programs out there. Jay says mainly the black marriage lasted longer, surviving longer. Yeah, I mean, it's like you didn't really have a choice. Like coming out of the out of slavery, most black families were married, and they did it for survival. Jay says shotgun wedding is still a man taking responsibility. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not saying it was bad. I wasn't saying shotgun weddings was bad. I was actually holding it as a form of accountability that's missing today. When a guy knocked a woman up, he saw it as his responsibility to take care of her and that child. So yeah, so we're in agreement there. He said what happened in the 60s and 70s. So like I said, that was when through these programs like through Lyndon B. Johnson, you he like Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to like do his own version of the New Deal started by FDR, by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Like he tried to do his own version of the New Deal where he made a lot of mistakes. One, he said he was going to have these niggas voting Democrat for the next 50 years, and that's exactly what he did. Um, he gutted, so he did so many things. So he gutted the psychiatric um, institutions because there was all this stuff talking about how they were mistreated. So he started these community mental health centers where people could voluntarily come when they needed treatment, but people who are suffering from severe mental illness don't check themselves in. So most of these people, that's what doubled the amount of homeless people are on the streets. A bunch of people who were suffering from mental illness or people who are addicted to drugs. Um, then he started these social welfare programs to benefit the black community, but they really only benefited black women because, like I said, to to um, be able to get Section 8 housing, you couldn't have a man in the house. And to qualify for those TANF and food stamp programs, stuff like that, you you know you couldn't work but so much, or you would be disqualified. So that stymied, ambition and career ambition and other things. Um, then the black community was also flooded with drugs. Uh, we know part of the reason why that happened. CIA, but um, although that is an oversimplification, but they have admitted that they were working with those folks that did bring those drugs into the community. So that's not even it's not even a myth anymore. um, so like I said, you had the undermining of of psychiatric institutions. You had the rise of these government welfare programs, which um, led to people shedding responsibility for self improvement, for career ambition, and for holding together black families because you couldn't have a nuclear black family to 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 get most of these programs. And then again, you also had the community being flooded with drugs. On top of that, you had these you had this reaction to the civil rights movement led by um, certain people in the government like Hoover and stuff like that that undermine uh, civil rights leaders, even leading leading to working with people who may have been responsible for assassinating many of these prominent leaders, like Medgar Evers, um, you know, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton. Um, and you had a lot of then you had a lot of these black baby boomer women and Generation X black women who looked down upon their mothers for being, these submissive wifey types, thinking like they don't want to live like that. They want to be like these liberal white women and be more independent and get their career and go to school and all this sort of stuff. And not realizing, it wasn't an either or. It wasn't an either or scenario. It wasn't uh, you become, girl, you don't need no man. You need to go to school, get you a career, blah blah blah. All right, you can do that, but it's not like you had to shit on conventional relationships. And then they reach their 30s, 40s, and 50s and realize, oh, I actually want a man. And then realize that the men don't want them anymore. So now they're salty about it. Now all these women are like, oh, these guys, all the good ones, all the good ones are taken, all the rest are gay or in jail. And like I said, for 50 years, you had these women shitting on black men, saying they're all deadbeat dads. All of them are philandering cheaters and stuff like that. Um, that they're an endangered species, so that most of them are either locked up, dead, or gay. Um, and you had all these movies coming out dogging black men, from Color Purple and so on. You had all these little daytime talk shows like Oprah and Donahue, Sally Jessy Raphael, and Ricky Lake, Jenny Jones, and Charlie, whatever his name was, and all these little daytime talk shows, all these movies, all these uh, black black feminist novels, just shitting on black men. And then when black men decide, but then when black men started having these barbershop conversations online on YouTube and stuff like that, then it became a problem because they were basically expressing the thoughts they would usually have amongst each other quietly. Like I would be, as a kid, listening to my discussions, hearing my uncles talk, my father and my uncles and stuff like that. These discussions they used to have when the women weren't around, and that's basically what they do on YouTube today. The stuff that a lot of these black guys are talking about are basically the discussions we used to have in private with each other, but now they're online for everyone to see, and black women don't like what they hear. Jay says, today girls are told they have rights to abort to protect their way of life, bounce from man to man for the best payday, and their rights matter more than men. Going AFK. Right. Culture collapses. I mean, that was all a representation of what post-traumatic slave syndrome has done to the black men in the communities. Yeah, I'm not really buying that post-traumatic slave syndrome thing. First of all, it's never been accepted within the psychology community as a legitimate mental health disorder by the DSM. It wasn't in the DSM 3, 4, or 5. Uh, I think there might have been. I don't think there's even reference to it in any of them, to be honest. Um, that was what that black psychiatrist, and I've read her, Francesca. Um, I forgot her full name. Sorry, but she that was she and some other black psychologists and psychiatrists that had conceptualized that, but there's no, like I said, it's not accepted within the psychiatric community. It's not considered a valid mental health disorder within the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical of Manual of Mental Disorders. Um, and it's not very it doesn't have a clear operational definition. So in behavioral and social sciences, particularly like in psychology, there is in science, uh, any sort of hypothetical construct um, has to be operationally defined. What operational de- what an operational definition means is that the phenomena, the the phenomena that is hypothesized to exist, um, has to be the means of testing that very phenomena is how you define it, right? And so there's there's really not a sharp delineation of what makes up post-traumatic slave syndrome to say that that is what's the cause of black people's problem today. Now there is generational trauma, that there is that, okay, and there is, so we do have hard evidence on generational trauma within psychology, but um, it, so if if post traumatic slave syndrome is just a way of expressing thoughts about generational trauma, then I get that, but that but again, there's no even so even if it were the case that it was legitimate mental disorder, it's still not a silver bullet to explain all the problems in the black community. A lot of the problems in the black community stem from several issues. Like I said, so you have poverty, you and yes, you do have the history of slavery and racial oppression. That I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. That's not to say that that still is a problem today, but yes, that is a factor. You have the history of slavery and racial oppression. You have poverty. You have, again, these programs that were instituted in the '60s, um, that undermine um, black families, and we know in behavioral and social sciences that the family is the family is the basic unit of society. You you destroy the family, you destroy that society, because again, the family is the basic unit of society. So you have, like, again, you had social programs being instituted in the '60s that undermine the nuclear black family. Um, then again, you had the community being flooded with illicit drugs. Um, there was social change underway that encouraged encouraged casual sex. You know, that whole hippie movement and free love and all that dumb shit. Like, that was under the boomers. Um, then you had the wave of feminism affecting the coming into the black community, where all these white liberal women were telling black women to embrace feminism. Um, and then, like I said, there was mental health problems in the black community. Like, I've often said, in Baltimore, like, probably like over 90% of the people here have mental health issues, and I wasn't even the first one that said that. Like, my mother's friend, he was trained as a psychologist. He was telling me that, like, 25 years ago, and I was like, really? That sounds like a high number. He was looking at me. He was like, no, I'm serious. He's like, most of these people, he said, look, most of these black people in Baltimore, he said, they have mental health problems, man. And believe me, this is not this is not unique to only Baltimore. This happens with a lot of in a lot of black communities, particularly within inner inner cities. He was like, man, he's like, man, over. I forgot the actual number, but it doesn't matter. He was just saying like over 90% of these people have mental health problems, and he I I'm quite convinced that he is right now. So again, these people, most of the time, these people don't get treatment for their problems until they're incarcerated. And then the most controversial of all these variables, like all these other variables, I think most of you guys would agree with, but the most controversial of them, I did a whole separate live stream on because I knew it gets so little attention because it's so controversial that most people kind of shy away from it. But the other variable involved is just there is a bit of intellectual disparity amongst different racial groups, and black people hold the lowest average IQ, and that is partly environmental but also partly genetic. And we know it's partly genetic because not only do black people have the lowest IQ scores, but black Africans have even lower scores than black Americans. So black Americans, the average IQ, and when I say average IQ, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the entire group. So the there's always going to be a large variance um, between an individual's IQ and the IQ of the group of which he belongs. So knowing the IQ of the group he comes from will tell you nothing about the individual, right? So the average IQ within the black community is 85, which is pretty low. I mean, it's very low. That's below average, right? Average is between 90 and 110, with 100 at the mean, right? So with if you look at the since general intelligence is normally distributed throughout the general population, it forms sort of a bell curve, a normal distribution curve, and we normalize the average at 100, and with a range being between 90 and 110. Falling below 90 is below average. Falling above 100, going above 100, going above 110 is above average, right? And so with an IQ of 85, you gotta expect that some social there's going to be some social ramifications of that. And then when you look and then you look at sub sub-Saharan Africa, where the average IQ is even lower than black Americans, it's at 68. 68. At 68, that would reach and that would be intellectual. That would be an individual at that IQ level would be someone who has uh, moderate intellectual dysfunction, which used to be called, mental retardation. And so then you wonder, so it comes at no surprise this sub-Saharan Africa is in such a sad state of affairs when the average IQ within the continent is 68. And so, like I said, that's the most controversial variable, but it's just one of many variables in which we can attribute to the problems in the black community. So that's just one, but I made a whole separate live stream about it because it's something that's never talked about because it's so controversial. And I backed it up with a lot of data if people want to check that out. Um, but yeah, so it's a lot of issues for why the black community is in a sad state of affairs. But the destroy, but yeah, a lot of the things that black the black manosphere and black YouTubers talked about was the gender dynamics and how that undermine um, black families through this through a lot of these women embracing feminism, um, and even just going beyond feminism to just outright man hating. Like I said, Oprah was was the was like one of the main people in that regard that like she was clearly undermining black men on her daytime talk show back in the 80s and 90s, and still does so today. Her and Gayle King, that little fucktard bitch. Um, like you remember right when what's the NBA star guys? Black Mamba. What's his name? I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. You know what I'm talking about, the you know um, Kobe Bryant. Thank you, bro. Yeah, when Kobe Bryant died, Gayle King, not a week later, was doing a show talking about, yeah, but remember when he was accused of rape and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, really, bitch? First of all, the case was dropped. He didn't win the case. The case was dropped, which is a whole different like it didn't go like it didn't go. He didn't have to beat the case. The case was dropped because of a lack of evidence. Yet she felt fit to she felt fit to throw that man under the bus in his right after he died. So even though Gayle King a fellow alum of my alma mater, fuck that bitch. Her and Oprah. Oprah lied for years talking about how she was sexually assaulted as a child by these people, and there's no corresponding evidence to any of the stuff that she alleged. Like, fuck Gayle King, fuck Oprah Winfrey, fuck The Color Purple, and The Color Purple. First of all, that is a great novel, by the way, but that was one of those things. The Color Purple became a trope amongst black women. They took it as history. It was literally just a work of fiction. And most of these women didn't even read the novel. They only went by the book. They only went by the movie. People who actually read the book, the movie is only the first half of the book. I repeat that. The movie is only the first half of the book. The second half of the book, Celie and Mister become very close friends, and he even falls in love with her at the end of the novel, and she's just like, no, let's just remain friends because she was lesbian. She became lesbian or bisexual or whatever with Shug Avery, which in the movie they weren't as explicit about their relationship in the movie because this was still the 80s. But in the novel, her and Shug Avery had a lesbian relationship, and like I said, in that second half of the novel, Mister went about trying to undo all the wrongs that he did to Celie, and they became close friends. And he even started like falling in love with her, and she was like, "No, let's just remain as friends." But they don't show you that in the movie. All they show you is the first half with all him doing all this evil stuff, and then somehow all these women got it in their mind that that's what was really happening to black women back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It's like, no, it wasn't. There was no history of that whatsoever. There were no there, there were no case studies about that. There was no there was just no data to support that the color purple was something that was ubiquitous within the black community at that time. But they all took it, even today, as an actual state of affairs. Um, then also because women generally, um, get more education than men, black women start hollering this trope that they were the most educated group in America. I was like, no, you're not. Like statistically, everyone knew that was false because it was out of we already knew which group was the most educated is Asians, and if we divided by both race and gender, it was Asian women are the most educated group in America, not black women by far. Black women were just the most enrolled. The most enrolled does not mean the most educated. The most enrolled just like the most educated means you actually attained the degree. Enrolled just means that doesn't mean anything. And on top of that, if you if you really want to tease that apart, the most within the black community, the most educated were actually Nigerians, particularly Nigerian women. And that was another thing that was a lie about feminists saying that men used to undermine them when it came to education. That's why they don't feel bad that men are falling behind in education today. When that was not the case. It has always been the case that women have been more in school than men because usually men had to leave school to go to to go to work. They had to either support the family or they had to or they didn't have a family to keep them in school, so they had to go right into the working force. They had to go right into the workforce. They didn't have the luxury of finishing high school, much less college. So women were always the more educated of the two genders, um, stemming all the way back to like I said, the early 20th century. So that whole myth of by feminists that that men used to undermine women getting their education was just bullshit. That was never the case in the West. Now, what what was the case was that often many of the elite universities didn't allow women, but the elite universities didn't allow anyone. Like the elite universities, like the elite and Ivy League universities back then, they didn't allow women. They didn't allow black people. They didn't allow Jewish people. Like they didn't allow anyone. You had to. They only allowed white men, um, Christian white men, and so everyone had their own schools. So just like we had the historically black colleges and universities, there were Jewish universities, they were all women universities. What happened is once these people start being admitted into the mainstream elite universities, a lot of these schools either closed or consolidated with the elite universities, or they became or they no longer were like just single sex or just catering to Jewish or other people. The HBCUs are the only colleges that remain that still cater predominantly to one group, but all the other ones became more mainstream universities as these other groups were allowed into these elite universities. So, but I mean, some of these all female universities still exist, like Bryn Mawr and stuff like that, right? Vassar. I remember one of them, one of my professors. He was a guy. He was a neuroscientist, but he worked in food science. He was even telling me he was even telling me he said, "Hey man, you should apply." He was like an Italian white guy. He was a great guy. We used to just call him Doctor C. He was like, yeah man. He's like, you should apply to these schools. He's like they're basically like female Ivy League schools. He was like it's the undergrad is only women. He said, but the graduate schools are co-ed. He said, so if you want to apply to a graduate school, he said, think about these schools because they'll probably let you in. He's like, plus you're black, so you might get that as that might be an edge when you get into those schools as well. So, like, look, professors will put me on game. Look, Graduate students put me on game when I was an undergrad. Like, but all that's to say, women have never suffered. Like, women in the West, in America, and I would say in like America and the UK particularly, and I would say Canada as well, were never like oppressed by and large from uh, receiving their education. Like maybe they couldn't go to particular schools, but they were able to receive their education. What happened was they weren't always able to go into the labor force to become professionals, or or they were expected that once they married that they would, they would leave the workforce once they did. But women were not kept from jobs, and they were not kept from education. And so black women taking on these feminist tropes undermine the black community, because we didn't have the same dynamics that white people had in America with, you know, undermining our women. Like the black community, out of necessity coming out of slavery, was more egalitarian than mainstream white society. And often it was the case that black families were always like dual dual income earning households, because often they didn't make as much as their white counterparts, so they had to rely on a double, on, you know, on two incomes and not just a single income. This was something I told my teachers back when I was in high school, in the ninth grade, by the way, because they were talking about, they were spreading all this feminist bullshit. And I was like 14, and I was like, well, actually, back in the day, I was like, a lot of black families were two income earning households because they didn't have the luxury of subsisting on a single income. And some of these female teachers, they were like, oh yeah, you do have a point. um but anyway, let me read some of these comments. Culture Collab says the black man was strategically removed from the home and family unit. Yep. He said, why would that be? He says more a social construct. Well, no, I'm not saying family. Yeah, family is a social construct, but look, it does, if it has real effect, it has effects on the external world, right? So it it is something that is it is something that can be it's something measurable, right? The family is something that you can measure. You know, what's the family consist of? Is there is there a mother? Is there a father? Are there children? Is there extended family with grandchildren, like with grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins? Like, these are things that are measurable. Culture Collab says it will never be in a DSM-5. Well, yeah, I mean that's because it's not a the that's because that post traumatic slave syndrome isn't quantifiable. It's not quantifiable. There's no clear operational definition of post traumatic slave syndrome, and there's not hard evidence for it. Like I said, you need hard evidence so that you can well, you have to devise an operational definition, and the operational definition is actually the means of testing whether that phenomena exists, right? um, which is why they call it operational definition, because it's the operations of testing, of measuring that phenomena or that construct. and when you have a means of testing that construct, that gives you the evidence for or against it. Okay, so yeah, it's not, it's it's more, I would say the post traumatic slave syndrome is more of a philosophy than an actual like mental health disorder that would be taken seriously by the clinical community. But that's not to say that there aren't mental health, like there are mental health issues in the black community. That is very, that is real, and that's something, like I said, I pointed out like a few minutes ago. That is something under that is under this undertreated. Like I said, many people in the black and that suffer from mental health illness in the black community usually don't get treatment until they are incarcerated, or they find themselves within the, in the justice system. uh Culture class says I'm in the psychology field, sir. That's cool. He says just recording PTSD. No, PTSD is a little different, and there are actually a lot of people who, like, people who do suffer PTSD in the in um in the black community, particularly in the inner city where there's a lot of violence. A lot of kids are exposed to a lot of violence uh, at a young age, and that can cause PTSD. So you're right, but that has nothing to do with the whole post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is supposed to be something that's passed on, um, similar to generational trauma, but supposed to being like having this sort of like um, something that's more pseudoscience, which is like memories, these memories that are passed on from the time of slavery. That's just not very scientific, to put it bluntly. uh, Culture collapses to fit what has specifically affected black populations and the family dynamic, admitting there's generational trauma is equivalent to the point. No, like it's not equivalent, because generational trauma has hard evidence for it, and it's not merely like, it's not like people confuse the concept of generational trauma with something that is more in pseudoscience or pseudopsychology, which is like genetic memories and stuff like that. And there's no evidence that there's genetic memories. Generational trauma is not the same thing as that. Generational trauma is um, something that's neurobiological. Okay, whereas um, the whereas stuff like concepts of like genetic memories and post-traumatic slave syndrome delve into more hokey sort of um, things that aren't really supported by hard evidence. Claire says this a semantic disagreement. Not really, because they're not the same things. He's only mentioned it to point out, uh, he's to mention to your point of Black men in America and the role they've played and have been portrayed as. Which, yeah, I mean, I get, no, I do. I don't think I didn't get your point. I get what you were trying to say. I was just being pedantic to just to say that concept by Dr. Um, Francesca Welsing, or whatever her name is, this black psychiatrist who's like, she was like this, Afrocentric sort of conscious person. Like, she was important back in the 90s. Like, John Singleton used the concept of baby boy in that movie Baby Boy with Tyrese, based on ideas that she came up with. Um, but yeah, I mean, I get your point. Um, so don't think that I missed the point for just being, pedantic about these ideas. I just didn't want to. I'm just pedantic because I don't want to push misinformation on people watching my streams, or watching this broadcast replayed later on. Coach Class's feminism was a social construct started by white women. Black women were drug into their plight. Um, yeah, it was started as from first wave feminism was from its inception was used as a way to undermine families. So of course, when it got spread into the black community, it undermined black communities by under you know through having ideas that were destructive to our families as well. Culture collapse is so true. Many urban populated areas face many challenges highly due to undiagnosed and untreated PTSD. Um, I'm here /D says, I mean, yeah, you might be black, but it will never define what your purpose is on this earth. Um, I guess I am under the well, I'm one of the folks that don't believe there is a purpose for us being here. Um, not I mean, I'm not a nihilist or anything like that or an existentialist, but I think the existentialists do get it correct when they say um, that there's no that outside of taking it on faith, there's no reason to believe that there is a purpose to life. So that much they get right, but how they go about that, whether it leads them down some nihilist uh, um, rabbit hole or whatever, like that's a topic for a different day. Jay Bello. I don't know why this was hitting. Probably just because you used a curse word. But I'm gonna show it. Jay Bello 6084 says shit makes sense. You are clearly more intelligent than most white folk, but that's what people don't understand about averages, right? The big thing when people talk about intelligence or um, any other sort of like um, property that is normally distributed amongst the population. Like for instance, there's some things that aren't normally distributed across the general population, like wealth. Wealth is a very good example of something that's not equally distributed. I mean, normally distributed across the general population. But things like intelligence and uh, uh, other sorts of variables are. And the thing to remember is what 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 is understood about the group is not what's understood about the individual. Actually, those make up two different logical fallacies, which is there's one fallacy that you commit when you infer that what's true of a member of a group is true of the group itself. And then there's a separate logical fallacy, which is that you commit when you take what's true of the group is true of the member of that group. And so that happens again with things like general intelligence and other psychological traits or physical traits, which is there's always going to be uh, a bigger variance or difference between individuals within a group than differences between groups. So averages can only group averages can only tell you differences between one group and another group. It can't tell you anything about individuals within those separate groups, because within that group, so say you like talk about black Africans who have the lowest average IQ of anywhere in the world at 68. That does that still doesn't mean that individual coming out of, I don't know, Lagos, Nigeria, that person might have an IQ of 145, with a PhD in neuroeconomics, whereas you might have someone coming out of the group with the highest average IQ in the world, which are Ashkenazi Jews, who have an average IQ, I believe, of about uh, I think 106 or something. I think like 106 or 108, something like that. Um, but that individual might be a moron. He might have an IQ of like 87. So yeah. So um, the 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 um, the variance again between the group average and the individual's score are going to be much greater than the group differences amongst different groups, if that makes sense to you guys. Uh, Clara says IQ isn't everything, though. Yeah, I mean, I already said it. That's why I said that's just one of many variables that affects the Black community, and but what I said is very underappreciated. That's why I did a whole separate live stream about that, because as I was doing different critiques about the Black community at the time, I wanted to make a separate thing about that, because it's something that I've touched upon in a lot of live streams, but I've never talked about it just by itself, because I thought it deserved its own attention, just to talk about alone, because it's usually something that's not talked about that much, or it's misunderstood, um, or is um, uh, again underappreciated, and end up being tied into other issues. So I did a whole live stream on that if people are interested. But yeah, I get what you're saying. It isn't everything. I've never claimed that it was. He said people with higher IQ are more likely to subscribe to progressive subversions such as feminism and LGBT inclusion. The first world isn't even reproducing anymore. So that's not actually true. You're talking about more. So what is true is that people who go on to higher education are more likely to be left leaning, because because the institutions themselves are left leaning. Like I myself, again, when I first became 18 and registered to vote, I registered as a Republican, but I was a liberal Republican. But as I went on to my 4-year university, I shifted more towards the left. I joined the Green Party, um, and I even started embracing certain democratic socialist ideals when I was working at this food co-op, because most of the people in the food co-op were very far left. Um, I was a vegan atheist. I'm still atheist, but I was a vegan atheist, um, progressive. I never became feminist though. I couldn't abide by it. And I took a feminist class and got an A in it. I took a class in feminist psychology, and the professor was delightful. She was really nice. She knew the author of the textbook that we used. It was through her that I read the Color Purple book and some other good books as well. And we didn't even have to read the whole book for the class. Just different selections of it. But I went on and read the whole thing just because it was a good book. We also had to read Beloved, so I read that. That was also turned into a movie. Also had fucking Oprah Winfrey's ugly ass in it. So yeah, read Beloved as well. Um, but no, so what is true often of people of higher IQ, or which is a measure of general intelligence, is that they tend to be they tend to be more socially liberal, but more uh, but more economically conservative. Okay, So that is usually the case. They tend to be more socially liberal, but more economically conservative. But as far as being progressive and embracing things like feminism and the LGBTQ um, movement, that is something that comes out of going to um, going to elite institutions. That is not a symptom of of higher intelligence. That's a symptom of some of these uh, academic institutions. As far as the first world isn't reproducing anymore, we're not as even as bad as in places like Japan and South Korea and China. Like everywhere, um, that has been embracing more modernist ideas, we've seen a drop in re, re, uh, in people getting married and having children. But again, let's not think that there's a silver bullet, that there's one single cause. There's multiple things affecting it. What's also affecting it is late stage capitalism. Late stage capitalism is also affecting the reason why people aren't marrying and having children. A lot of people can't afford to get look, marriage is now a luxury of people of upper middle class to higher class. People in the lower class can't afford it shifted like back, like back about 100 years ago. It made more sense for poor people to marry so they could have families that they could raise, they could work, they they could work the farm, or could go do other sorts of labor, um, to bring money to support the household. So, but that shifted now. It became it's way more expensive to have children because you're expected to have daycare. Either you don't have daycare or someone has to be home to raise the children. And in today's age, when again all the women are working, you double the labor force, so you cheapen the amount of wages you have to pay to the labor force, since you doubled the amount. um, so now that everyone makes way less, it becomes harder to have a single income household unless that husband is wealthy. And so people can't afford to have children, and when they do, they gotta pay out the ass to to do daycare, because neither parent can afford to stay home and have the amount of income. So it's not just being progressive or higher educated or more intelligent that's leading to people not reproducing. You got to look at late stage capitalism. You have to also look at um, the fact that a lot of people don't think. Then there are people who are having children outside of marriage, because they don't have, there's no longer the social norms, um, that that um, that make it that make it inappropriate to have children, to have illegitimate children. Culture collapse. Yeah, she had to try. Some women would never let a man be great, referring to like Gayle King and how she tried to undermine Kobe and his death. After that, I never rocked with her. I don't care. Like like I said, she came to my alma mater because she's an alum of University of Maryland as well, and I think she did I think she did the commencement speech. Um, but I didn't care. I don't like her. In fact, there was no reason to undermine that man in his death, especially when that whole issue was thrown out by the courts. Like I said, that he was it wasn't something that he had to actually like beat the case and found and was found innocent. Like it was thrown out. But the fact that she wanted to bring that up after he died was really, and like right, not, and I don't mean like years after his death, like literally like a few weeks after his death. That was so inappropriate. I'm here says people hate and people discriminate, but doesn't give a real reason to do the same thing uh, afterwards unless you want to be there by their side.
Find your perfect tax expert, whatever your tax situation might be.
Brandon Wade says, "What's your social security number?" Your mother sucks my dick.com. SS. That's what it is.
It's Tuna Tuesday, the new sub of the day. Just $4.99 and Subway. Eat fresh, feel good.
Anyway, Coach Webb says, I mean, it was, though, even in Charleston, South Carolina, a man could still beat his wife as punishment legally to recent years. Like, I'm not going to get into, like, legal case studies or whatever. And just because something is, again, you can't go by what's on the books. Just because something is on the books doesn't mean that that's something that's actually in legal practice, like, just in day-to-day practice. You have to realize if you want to like do something that's really fun, look up all the bizarre laws that's been on the books in American history. You'll see some bizarre laws on the books. And again, just because, which just goes to show that just because these um, laws were on the books doesn't mean that these were things that were in actual everyday practice. Put on some more music for you guys. Uh, Well, I'm gonna watch this after I get off. Goku versus Dragon Ball villains. It's supposed to be a Jubilee parody. If you ever watch Jubilee, that this looks like that's gonna be funny. I'm gonna watch that and the incredible rise and fall of Pog. I was never into Pog in the '90s. I must have missed that trend because I remember hearing people talking about Pogs, but I don't remember people bringing it to school or anything. I I guess I missed out on the trend. Like I knew more about Pogs after it died off, but I never really saw people doing it. So I'm gonna check out that video. But anyway, let me get some music. Find some music. Yeah, Mozart effect. But yeah, even if it was legal on the books for a man to legally beat his wife, doesn't mean that men were literally going around beating their wives on a day-to-day basis. Like excuse me, again, like I said, and Kevin Samuel said this a number of times as well. There has never been case studies showing that 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 women were just that men were just going around beating their wives to the extent that you saw in The Color Purple. That was clearly a fiction. That was a fictional narrative meant to meant to like project again this black womanist viewpoint by the author. But again, that was not history. That was never history. Just because you can point to a law on the books, like I said, there are weird laws on the books, and I'm not kidding you. If you don't believe me, Google some right now. You guys can Google some weird laws on in America's history, and put them in the chat room. You'll see a whole bunch of weird stuff. Like you can only shoot your cat on Wednesday or some dumb shit like that. I'm serious. There are weird laws in the books. That does not mean that people are regularly shooting their cat on Wednesday. I made that up, by the way. I'm just using that as an example of how there are very ridiculous laws in the books. That one is fictional, but trust me, there are very ridiculous laws on the books if you go into the history of different states and law laws going all the way back to the colonial era and even post-colonial America had weird laws in the books and laws that came out of the great the great American expansion because of the Monroe Doctrine and all that. You look at some of those laws. Like why do you think it's because some of those weird laws, like we have people who think they can take your home if they like if you're not home, like we've been seeing this here on the East Coast, right? Where people, if you're not at in your house and someone decides to come inside your house, they basically can claim your house now, right? Because of some obsolete laws coming out of the Great Expansion West. Like that again, just because there are weird laws in the books doesn't mean that points to their actual to there being a regular practice of people exercising that right. Uh, Jared Boss says whose standards? Um, according to what are you referring? Clara says women also mature faster, so they do better in school. Mm, that's no. Again, it's not that. Again, we gotta separate correlation from causation. Women do better in school today because public education has been feminized. Young boys don't typically stay in their seats for 6 hours a day, right? Like when you look at like a lot of these a lot of these schools that are underfunded, like they lack physical education programs. Like back in the day, we had gym every freaking day. I mean, it's funny, like you might go from English, like like your first class might be English, your second class is gym, like you're sitting there wrestling and playing basketball, and then then the third class of the day is algebra. I was like, you just went from English to beating up people to algebra. And but that guys needed that. Like physical education was important, one, because there was an expectation that young people be physically fit and learn the necessary skills to be fully functional people, which required being physically fit and knowing things like how to play sports, how to defend yourself, how to exercise, right? That was a part of general education until a lot of these schools were underfunded, so they took things that they thought was lesser importance out of the curriculum, like physical education and art and music. But like, yeah, I mean, look, when you were younger, especially like say in elementary school, you had not only did you have gym, you also had recess because kids had a lot of energy, so they needed recess. So, what was the best way to keep them able to sit, be able to sit and attend to their studies all day long? They needed they needed physical they need to physically exert themselves. So you had gym and you had recess. When you cut gym and you cut recess out, but you still expect these kids, particularly boys, to just sit in their seats for 6-7 hours a day, that's fucking unrealistic. But women maturing faster than us really is doesn't have a large part in that. I mean, it plays. I guess it plays some part in it, but no, like I said, it's just that public education has become more feminized. There's often a lack of consistent physical education taught, and again, women have always usually received more education than men because historically men were expected to go into the workforce earlier than women. women weren't generally expected to go into the workforce except when they were single, and then by the time they were married, they were expected to leave the workforce and support their families. And if they came from a and if they came from a privileged background, they probably never went into the workforce. But even for the ones who did, who came from, working class communities, usually, earlier on you know, in early generations, they typically left the labor force once they got married. But until then, they could finish high school, or even go on to college, where most men couldn't. Usually, only men of privilege went on to college or to finish high school. Like, it was normal even up until the 70s for a lot of men not to finish high school, even all the way up to the 70s. JR says JR the boss is an idiot, can be educated. You only have to be smart in what you care about. Yes and no. Man, there's some retarded people in this on here. I'm not gonna even respond to them. It's not worth it. Bashir 5768 says dual income, no kids. JR says you're either rich, poor, or in the middle. Yeah, well, yes and no. Again, I I know I sound like I'm being non. I know when I say yes and no, It sounds like I'm being non-committal. It's not I'm being non-committal. It's just that um, I like to be more exact in and what I say. Um, but I'll say this: the middle class has been dying. The middle class has been dying, and the poor and the rich are having a wide chasm. Like, so the middle class is shrinking, economically speaking, and more people are either becoming so more people are either uh, hitting the poverty level or reaching the upper classes. And so now it's like there's different, like, with the wealthy, there's like the wealthy, and then there's the super wealthy, as opposed to there being a thriving middle class. Having a thriving middle class is what keeps society together. Um, most of society's laws fall to the middle class because um, the upper class don't have to abide by them, and the lower class says fuck the law. So it's the middle class that gets fucked by the government and by the law. This is one of the things that conservatives teach us, that is taught in political conservatism, that basically the government fucks over the middle class because the upper class doesn't need the government to survive, and the lower class isn't helped either way. So there's like, fuck that. Excuse my blunt language. I was just trying to dumb it down a bit.
A blind spot that's never out of sight.
JR says no man can be moved from his home if he really wants to be there. The narrative is BS. I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you're referring to the welfare thing, again, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but yeah, I mean, when it came again to these women choosing Section 8 housing over their man, bye bye man. So That's year 5768 says, how do we bring back up the value of the nuclear family structure? Um, I mean, you lead by example. Get married. I mean, here's the thing though, because I've did a separate stream where I actually said that the black pillars actually have a point when they say that it's not in the guy's interest to marry. So I do, and I know this sounds like a hypocrite because I am married myself, but the way I, but I was more exact. I was so the black pillars just say don't get married. That they say no. Unlike the red pill, that the red pill basically tells you, basically build yourself up and you'll find good women once you've built yourself up. Um, the black pill says no, that's stupid. You're gonna get fucked either way, no matter what you do. That you're better off just going your own way, and just basically using women as sexual objects and nothing more. Um, and that's very nihilistic. But I do agree that I don't find it. I just don't think it's in the guy's interest to marry in America because the in Western countries like the U.S., the U.K., and Canada and Australia, women are incentivized to break the contract of marriage, to get alimony, to get child support, to get the house. Like it is irrational to enter into it's irrational to enter into a contract where the other party is incentivized to break the contract, and that's what we see in the West. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get married at all. What I tell people is you should find your women overseas. If you do still want to marry, like some guys just saying, I'm not going to marry, fuck that. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, do you? But people who do still want who still value a traditional family need to find those women overseas because there's very few traditional women here in America. The irony is that these modern women still want traditional men. And again, these are one of the ideas pushed in, you know, the red pill and manosphere spaces that women hate and say this is a gender war when people say these sort of things. But it's like these guys get to share their ideas. You ladies got to share your ideas for 50 years, shitting on men, particularly on black men. You undermine the black nuclear family. Like most of us who did grow up with fathers in the 80s and 90s, usually these were stepfathers. But what happened is a lot of us were like, who grew up was like, I'm not going to be a stepfather. I don't want to bring up someone else's children. I want my own legacy. I want my own genetic lineage to go on. I don't want to take care of someone else's lineage. So I say, if you want a nuclear family, find a woman from overseas, whether she be from Africa or Brazil or Asia or Europe, or Latin America. You know, you know, whatever your preference is, pursue it, but overseas. As far as trying to fix things here in America, well, some of you can start, like I was saying yesterday or the other day in my live stream, some of you have to start on a grassroots level. Like start supporting politicians who want to get rid of things like no fault divorce, get rid of lifelong alimony, um, get rid get rid of uh, these extremely punitive child support laws. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be child support laws, but the the how punitive they are is ridiculous. Like a man can like lose his passport, his driver's license, be put in jail. Like, how is he supposed to pay it if now he has a record so he can't get a decent job to pay it? Like, it's ridiculous. Um, so I say, one, don't marry a modern woman, either here or overseas, because overseas there are some modern women, particularly in places like Europe and more westernized cities in Asia. Find traditional women. If you can find a traditional woman here in America, cool. But one, do not marry a modern woman. Marry a traditional woman. And usually most traditional women are only overseas nowadays. You're not going to find them in westernized nations. If you do go to Europe, Eastern Europe, not Western Europe, Eastern Europe. um, so marry traditional women, organize at the grassroots level to support politicians who want to get rid of no fault divorce, who want to get rid of lifelong alimony, who want to get rid of punitive child support laws, and and to change the family court system. Like, it doesn't make sense that the woman automatically gets the child when the person who usually makes the most money is the man. The person who makes the most money should be the one who has the child. And that used to be the case actually in the early 20th century. In the early 20th century, it was usually the man that had that when when uh, when there was a divorce, they usually kept the children. A lot of people don't know that. Yes, the men used to. It made sense, doesn't it? That the bread earner was the one who typically had custody of the child, since he was the one that had the means of taking care of the child. So that's what I say. I don't really have any solutions, because as Thomas Sowell always says, there really are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. So you're gonna have to, you know, no matter what you pick, there's always gonna be a trade-off. There's no perfect solutions. That's all I said. I did marry, but I married overseas. And my wife will be on live with me in a few days, so if you guys want to check that out. But yeah, I just don't put her on camera a lot because I don't want to, um, I don't want to commoditize my live stream by her being on here. Although we have considered her doing her own thing, um, having her own channel where we just do stuff together. So that's something we've been considering. But I wanted to grow this first. But in any case, um, it may be the case that nuclear family won't come back. Like I said, there's so many variables in place. Like I said, you have late stage capitalism, you have the the um, a lot of feminist ideas that have become mainstream. You have the weaponization of the legal system against men. Um, so I don't know. J.A.C, it seems like you like talking about people being smart or dumb, rich or poor, male or female. Why is that? Because it's a fact. Because these things affect people's behavior and the decisions they make, which affect other people. I don't see why you have an issue with labels. Labels just we need labels to categorize different concepts, and ideas. So it's to it's so you can think more clearly about things. JR says people have children outside of marriage because they have sex. Again, you're missing the point. As I said much earlier in my stream, there was much more in earlier generations. There was more social shame in having children outside of marriage. Having illegitimate children was looked down upon in earlier generations, whereas accepted now as the norm. The social norms have changed. When there was public shame in having illegitimate children, less people did it. People, so men often stepped up and would have these, and that's what came. That was the concept of the shotgun wedding. The shotgun wedding was the joke that you knocked up, that you got some girl knocked up, and then the father came at you with a shotgun. And was like, shh, well, you bet you gonna marry her now, boy. So that was the that was the joke of the concept of the shotgun wedding, which is basically after the man knocked up a woman, he felt the social responsibility to then um, make her a good woman by marrying her. That social norm no longer exists. It's not just because people have sex. That's as looking way back into early human history, there have always been um, the use of prophylactics of some sort, stemming all the way back to ancient Egypt. There were people were used different methods of birth control. So that's just not the case. We're not simply like the lower animals. Uh, oh, you said that was in response to my color purple reference. I know, that's what I was saying. I figured that's what you were talking about. And like I was saying, the color purple was never real history, but a lot of that was pushed into the black community. A lot of us grew up believing that shit was real, and it wasn't. What's up, Shane Legs? He said, I vaguely remember Pogs, but I was 4 when they were a thing. Yeah, I'm about to watch a video about that. Well, probably tomorrow, actually. Well, later today. It's super late. Vlada Stock 92 says you have a Most Def vibe. I dig it. Thanks. I like Most Def. Well, what does he go by now? He calls himself I forgot his name, but I usually just call him Most Def because that's how I remember him. Def Jeff 6 says middle class has been dead. I won't say it's dead, but it's definitely on life support. It's like I said, most people in the middle class have either sunk to poverty levels or risen to uh, or risen to the level of the working rich. The working rich are people who have like high income, but they still need to work to maintain that wealth. Where the super wealthy don't have to work to maintain their income, right? So that's the problem. Like instead of the middle class growing, you've grown the wealthy, and by extension, you've grown the poor because a lot of people fell out of. Unfortunately, we saw people who, um, their their parents did well, they're boomers, and then these kids from Generation X and millennials um, fell to poverty levels. Then you had others that grew out of the middle class into the the working rich, so to speak. Like there's terms where like they call it the upper middle class, or that's a lot of these terms are so imprecise. I don't like the term upper middle class, or they call them the the you know the working rich. or the 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 poor rich or whatever, all these different terms basically for people who are wealthy but they don't consider themselves wealthy because they still have to work for a living. um, but yeah, Def Joe says you can live check to check or not. mm, JR says I don't have an issue with labels, just a question. Well, I'm saying I am someone to be in order to be exact about things, you have to use terms to identify different concepts, different ideas, different, you know, different social constructs, um, different physical constructs, like different psychological constructs. I mean, if someone's uncomfortable with those things, it's more of a projection of their own, you know, their own issues than those things itself. I merely mention them because they are variables. They are variables in what affects people's behavior. People's socioeconomic status affects their behavior. People's intellectual ability affects their behavior. People's health affects their behavior. People's geographic location affects their behavior. People's beliefs affect their behavior. Um, so I'm not trying to be a smartass. I'm just simply saying that that is the case. JS, I just wanted to know why you think the way you think. I think your topics are interesting. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, like when you look, behavioral science is very complicated because unlike when you're dealing with um, like unlike when you're dealing with like the the physical sciences, um, when you are thinking about different variables, you don't have to take in everything, all these other things in the external world like you do when you're studying human behavior. Human behavior is a very complicated thing to to assess because there's so many things affecting it. You have, I mean, you have you have you know biological and genetic considerations. You have environmental considerations, and those are social and political and familial and so many different things. So all of these things affect. That's why I said. That's why I keep saying there's no silver bullet when I talk about these issues because when it comes to behavioral issues, like there's a lot of things that affect it. But a lot of times you have all these talking heads on social media, on these on these YouTube channels that talk about these things as if they're so simple and they're all wrong no matter what side they're on because they all talk about these things as if it's like it's one singular thing and they're all wrong because most of them don't have training in behavioral science. So JR says I get it, everything matters to a point. Everything matters except when it doesn't. Again, I know that sounds non-committal, but this is why you have to learn. This is why research matters. And like I said, when I talk in this way, I'm putting on my little nerdy psychological cap and trying to be as accurate as I can, while also still, you know, projecting my own views, but from a rational viewpoint where I can support it with different ideas and evidence and data or whatever. And I can point people to looking up that stuff too as well if they have questions on the stuff. Like for instance, like if you have question on the whole issues about intelligence and all that sort of stuff, I can point to things like reading the book The Bell Curve. Um, and like I said, I did a whole live stream on it where I give a lot more information as far as talking about wealth and stuff. I mean, there's so much information on that as well. Um, Depending on what and which way you want to go with that. But I'm about to go. It's extremely late. I need to get up early, like I always do. I need to put away these. I need to put away my claws for people who were here early in my live stream. I need to put away my Wolverine claws. So, um, I don't know where to put these at because I don't want it to cut up my bag. Well, it won't cut up the bag. It's not sharp. It's just, but they are stainless steel, so they will actually point tear through the bag. um, my little training duffel bag. But anyway, you guys can watch the replay of this broadcast later on after, because I upload this after uh, after I end the stream. So I'm gone. It's late. I didn't mean to be on this late, but good talk. Thank you guys. And again, like I said, the topic was, even though we diverted from the original idea of the topic, was that, you know, women weren't complaining that there was a gender war until men in the manosphere started sharing their viewpoints and their opinions on it, when it was only the women sharing their viewpoints through the mass media for the past 50 years, whether on daytime talk shows like Oprah Winfrey and Sally Jessy Raphael and Donahue and Ricky Lake and Jenny Jones and all those other shows. There was no problem. When they wrote novels that gave fictional histories of how men mistreated women, like The Color Purple, there was no problem. Or Beloved, when they had these TV, you know, when they wrote these magazine articles spreading these ideas, there wasn't a problem. When they spread these myths that black men were all deadbeat dads, despite statistical data showing that black men are the most involved in their children's lives, there wasn't a problem. When they said that um, all the there weren't any good men, there weren't any good black men because they were all locked up dead or in jail, there was no pushback, except amongst men privately in like barbershops talking amongst each other. When when they used to push a narrative in the 90s that we were an endangered species, like, people just accepted that bullshit. But now that we have our own voice and we're basically sharing ideas that we used to privately say, amongst each other in like barbershops and on the basketball court, now it's a problem. Now it's a gender war because we can share our ideas. So fuck those hoes. And bitches ain't nothing but hoes and trick. Let me stop. I'm playing. But no, seriously. But not. So as I've said a few years ago, if there is a gender war, they won, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. A Pyrrhic victory meaning you win, but at a large cost to yourself that wasn't worth winning, that may have not been worth winning. And so yeah, women won the gender war, but at the cost that men now no longer want to deal with them. We don't approach them anymore because they tried to say that we were all creepy if we approached them in real life, which is weird. So then that was the rise of the prominence of dating apps in the 2010s. And my next live will be about dating apps. That I segue into the next live stream for tomorrow, which will be on dating apps and why they're trash. No, not just that the dating apps are trash, but that the women on dating apps are undateable. That will be my next live. The women on dating apps are undateable. And so again, because a lot of men were scared to approach women in real life. Usually, the only men you see approaching women in real life either are super confident or older, of an older generation like myself, where they were used to having to approach women because we didn't have the luxury of dating apps and social media. Like there were dating apps in the 90s and in the early 2000s, but back then it was looked at as shameful if you had to meet someone on a dating app. But after like 2012, and it became the norm. And then a lot of women who let's be clear, a lot of these women, as they love calling guys losers and corny, let's start, in 2026, let's start calling women who are socially awkward losers and corny. A lot of these women who come online telling men that they're weird for wanting to approach them, which is what normal fucking people do. A lot of these women are losers, and they're socially awkward because how you approaching people in real life is what normal people fucking do. Now, if you don't like the person, you can always reject them, but that don't mean you turn it into some sort of theatrical display of shitting on that man just because you can. And then the thing is, they do want certain men to approach them, but the men they want to approach them typically don't have to approach women. So this is the gender war bullshit. Um, so again, they won the gender war, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Men don't approach them. Men are less likely to marry. Men do not go to these places where women want to find men. Like these women are fucking stupid. Like the places where they want, where they gather, they're surprised the men don't go to, because men don't share the same interests that women do. Most straight men aren't getting up to go to brunch. I'm fucking sorry. I had some chick make fun of me because I went to because I like to go to happy hour with my homeboy. I'm like, yeah, we're dudes. She's like, that's just so unhealthy. Bitch, I don't give a fuck what you think. But yeah, I mean, and like when I go to happy hour, it's like a sports bar. So women don't complain that men don't approach them, that they don't go to these meetups like brunch, or these dating, or these like um, what do you call the little dating things where you the thing where you match up with a bunch of people at one, the speed dating and all this shit. Men don't want to do that shit. I did that once in college, and that's because they begged us to, because they didn't have enough men to they literally didn't have enough men for the speed dating thing on my campus, for the Black Student Union that I think were hosting it. And they asked me and some friends to do it. I was like, all right, cool, we did it. And like the girls liked it because like we were like the only guys there, so we was getting like 4 or 5 girls at a time through these things. We were all just exchanging like our Facebook at the time. So I ended up friending a lot of them. Took any I don't think I dated any of them. But yeah, like a lot of them became like Facebook friends or whatever. Um, and yeah, like guys, but again, they had to beg us to do it because none of the guys wanted to do it. No one wanted to do the speed dating. Guys don't want to get up for fucking brunch. That's fucking gay. I'm glad we can say that again. It's gay. The social climb is healing itself. You're seeing people saying that shit is gay and retarded again, as they should. So yeah, guys aren't attending brunch. Guys don't want to do speed dates. Guys don't want to go to these I forgot what you call those things where you had like these little these little elaborate meetups where all these women are in attendance. They have to pay to go there to meet men, and they find out most men aren't even in attendance. There'll be a few guys who will come there to you know to devour to devour all the women there. But most men aren't interested because they know that they may not meet these women's satisfaction for what they want. So they're like, why am I going to pay to get? Why should I pay to attend some event where I'm going to get rejected? So the women won the gender war, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Men aren't approaching. They're not going to these places where women gather to find men. They're not marrying them, right? Um, a lot of us, a lot of us who have our passports are going overseas. Okay. Um, I keep it in plastic because just I don't, when I'm not using it, I just keep it in my little plastic. I keep a lot of stuff in plastic. I keep my books in plastic. I'm very I'm very meticulous that way. I don't like my things getting damaged unnecessarily, so I keep everything in plastic. Sort of like your grandparents used to keep the couch covered in plastic. Everything was covered in plastic. I don't do that with furniture, but I do that with books. So anyway, guys aren't approaching them, aren't dating them, aren't marrying them, aren't going to places to meet up with them. They will hit them up online on dating apps. Now guys aren't even using the dating apps. The dating apps are crashing because most of the men have left. When it's like 3 to 1 with men and women, and most of the men are getting rejected. When 95% of the men are getting rejected, why should they pay to get matched up on these things? Especially when there's one group that owns like 5 or 6 of those different online dating apps. I'm gonna talk about that tomorrow. Crazy, crazy. Yeah. So we're not doing that. But I need to go to sleep, guys. But that's all I gotta say. You can keep it going in the comments if you want, or if you have further questions. Um, we can talk about it in tomorrow's live stream, which will be about dating apps. But if you want to bring up something from today's broadcast, you can do so there. All right, I'm out. Peace to you guys. See you later.